Not sure if that's on.
Is this thing on?
Figure it out.
Nah. Well, all right. Cool. So everybody can hear me, right? Yeah. All right, cool. So, all right. This presentation is meant to turn heads like, what is he talking about? So, does anybody like already kind of know what I'm talking about? Okay, cool. 2 people. Cool. All right, so nobody's ever heard of Electron? Except the 2 people. Okay. All right, so anyways, basically it's a way of using web technologies on the desktop. All right, so it's an open source framework for developing desktop applications. And the way it does that is by using Node.js on the back end, and then it runs everything through Chromium. So it's just like having Chrome running all your stuff, your HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And just a couple popular apps are Slack. Probably a lot of people in here use that. WhatsApp, similar type thing. WordPress desktop, right? So that might be something for Drupal eventually, but the whole idea is to work less and provide more. So right now, if I was to want to make a Mac application, I'd have to learn C# and then C++ for Windows, Linux, or you'd have several different developers working on the same application. So Electron will compile to all 3 of those. So you already eliminate the need to do it 3 times with people who know 3 different technologies. So that cuts down development time, and it also expands the audience because a lot of people know these web technologies that don't even know how to get started with Windows or development or something like that, because it can be a pain for a beginner, especially to download your IDE you need, and figure out all that stuff, how to make it work. Whereas a lot of people just for fun have built websites. So the downside is that you are then forced to use JavaScript for all of your programming. And I know a lot of people are very biased to their programming languages, especially when it comes to native applications. So telling somebody smart, like doing that you have to use JavaScript, they may not like that. Because also there's better ways of doing things. But because this is a broad scope, you're just not going to be efficient with your memory. So like example, Slack. I've got like several different Slack channels, and each one runs its own little Chromium instance. Not to mention when you download Slack, you get a whole copy of Chrome just downloaded to your computer. And if you were to install any more apps, you'd have to download the same thing over and over. So beyond that, just the web technologies that I prefer to use when I mess around with this stuff. I'm a big fan of React.js. It's another JavaScript framework, like kind of like Angular. There's a bunch of them out there. But the whole idea is that, and this is probably where it got its name. I didn't really look it up, but the functions are reacting on states. So when something happens, you already have things listening for that to happen. A good example is like jQuery. Let's say someone clicks, you have a function that when they click, now you have to go do this other stuff. So once they click, I'm going to go change this div and make it the background color a different color, whatever. It's sort of thinking more programmatically like a back-end developer, because when you're building out your app, you're thinking when the state of your application is in this state, almost like a different page load. What do you want happening? So if the user's not logged in, I want a login box. And as soon as they log in, it'll go back to, it'll remove that box. It's very efficient as well. It uses virtual DOM, so it basically, it compares the DOM that you already have with the DOM that's been changed when the states have changed, and only takes the differences of those and injects them into the DOM. Uses JSX, which is just a way of writing your HTML and kind of intermingling it with JS. And to me, it feels right, so I like it. All right, so then Drupal 8 as a backend. Why would you want a desktop application that is running on Drupal 8, storing data there? For one thing, I think about not having to create UIs to add content or anything like that you might need. So in my example, I'm going to be using an FTP client. Well, you have accounts for your FTPs that you need to store somewhere. So you could use SQL or something like that. But you still want it in the cloud somewhere, which you could still use SQL in the cloud. However, come built in with Drupal is the fact you can go log into a website and then view all that data however you want, create views that show your FTP accounts, articles, whatever, and you can delete them right there. You don't have to spend any time building all that. So, and yeah, it's already got its core structures like users who can authenticate, your nodes, creating content types through a UI. And of course, and now that's Drupal 8, it's got REST and core automatically. I'm gonna add a contrib module, the JSON API module as well. So JSON API is a specification for how a client should request that resource be fetched or modified, and how a server should respond to those requests. And kind of the way I think of it is like another dialect of JSON. So I think I have some examples here. Yeah. So here's what I would call a dialect, right? JSON LD. It's got these little @ symbols that represent certain portions of data. So there's a context and an ID in this example, but then you got HAL or HAL or whatever, and it's like the H stands for like hypertext, I think. So it uses these underscores and stuff to present different data. I really haven't used HAL too much, but that's not right. But so JSON API, it just simplifies it. If you look at a standard JSON output for REST and core and Drupal core, you will see things like how the arrays are built, like your language, which oftentimes, if it's not a multilingual site, is none, and then 0 your value. It's kind of complicated, so it's not very aesthetically pleasing, right? Okay, so how do you get started with Electron and React? You can pick and choose here, but what I did was grab the Electron React boilerplate from GitHub. Let's see if that's an actual link. So it's fairly popular anyways, and it's just automatically got everything set up. it's got an example here. It's shown in the GIF. So you don't have to deal with all that. You don't have to set up your build tools, anything like that. So yeah, if you clone that, and then basically you'll have your JSON file that keeps track of all your dependencies. So if you install those node modules, however you do that, which is yarn or npm usually, once that's complete, you can just hit npm run dev, and it'll go ahead and spin up your application on your computer, whether you're on Windows, whether you're on a Mac or Linux. So actually I have my little app here. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Actually. So yeah, so npm run dev, and it'll spin it up. So now I have my app, which is I've already spent some time on it. It would actually look kind of similar to this right out of the box. So the first thing I'll do now is go ahead and set up the back end with Drupal 8. And first thing is install the JSON API module. Let me find my website here. I have this website. It runs on Doxel. Okay, so yeah, so if you use Composer, to manage your dependencies, you'll have to install it that way. So I enable JSON API. Another thing I would enable is this basic authentication, so that we can authenticate with Drupal and tell it who we are. But once I do that, as soon as you enable that module, wow. Actually, I should have it stored. You can immediately make a API call. So by getting, because if you get an article or something that's public, anybody can do that. So this is Postman. If you don't know, this is just a Chrome developer tools for posting and getting requests and stuff. Anyways, so article just comes out of core. So if you just get your article, and you have to send a couple of headers here. You don't need authorization. You just need to accept this vnd.api plus JSON and choose that as your content type. And that's straight out of JSON API. That has nothing to do with Drupal. Yeah, let me send that. So I basically am getting back every article that's on my website, which isn't many. It's just one, I think. So to do what I want to do for this example, we need an authentication method, and there's several different ones. There's a simple OAuth2 module, which is pretty sweet for getting tokens and stuff. But I'm just using the simplest one, which is basic authentication. So in Postman, they have a pretty easy way of doing this. Sorry. I meant to say too, bear with me, because this is kind of complicated, and I got a bunch of different browsers and stuff. But let me see if I can find. So any of these really will work, but if you go to your authorization header in Postman, you can choose basic authentication and enter your creds, which for this website is admin. And if you update it and look at your header, it'll automatically add the authorization header to it with the basic authentication there, and it'll send that when you make your request. And you'll have to do the same thing via JavaScript when you do make those calls that you need permissions for. So, do you think I have yeah, we're not going to worry about an example for that. Okay, so then the next thing I would want to do is set up my data structure, which is just a content type. So, go into content types here. I've already created this FTP account. And managing fields, I just put things that you would need when you connect, which is a host, a password, a port, username, account name, even though I'm using the title, but yeah, those fields right there, I'm going to basically, when I add my account, I'm going to populate those fields, and then I can pull them in later when it's time to actually connect. Okay, so that's really all you really need on Drupal 8 side for the thing I'm doing. Most of the code and stuff is going to be front end stuff.
So just a question, Toxil is running on your local machine, or is that a web? It's in the cloud. Which is this?
That's on my local. So let's see. So, I'll just show you. I exited.
Could it be in the cloud, or?
Yeah, basically wherever. Well, yes, you could do Doxel in the cloud, but normally you would just use your Linux server or something with Apache, the LAMP stack. You just need a website is all you need, and this is how I'm choosing to run my website. Right? But I don't have to pay $5 for a box or something. But I do want to show real quick that. So right now we're in this folder here, OpenFTP. That's where all the front end is, and then that's my back end, which is the Drupal site. Yeah. So. And I have, I think I cloned Doxel for Drupal or something like that, which already had a couple of these things set up. But if I go into my doc root here, you can do things like use Fin, and you can do like Drush, ULI, or any kind of clear cache, all that stuff, without actually going into the server. And I'm getting off track, so let me go back. I could talk about Doxel for a little while too. But so as far as the front end goes, what are some things we would need in a React application? We need a logged in state, because let me go to the actual application for a second. So I'm not logged in right now, so you need a state that tells whether you are logged in or logged out, especially for just to show this login box. So let me go to the code here. Okay. Inputs. You would need those two inputs, your username, password. They would need their own states, which would store their values. And then a function to update those states when you're typing. And then a function to take those states then and use them to authenticate with Drupal. So I have code here to look at, but when you're setting a state in React, you put it in the constructor, and this is kind of a mess. So if you're like into real clean code, you'd want to be using components, but I didn't want to mess with them for this. So I already have this, and by default, when you start the application, you're not logged in. So logged in is false by default. And then there's my username and password states that are just empty strings. So I probably should kind of give an overview of what's going on here. This is using ES6 JavaScript syntax. So you can import React, that's a library, all this stuff, jQuery. And then just the way you set up React. This is just a home class, and it was already given to me when I installed that React boilerplate. But what you have a constructor of this class, and that's where you want to declare your props and set all your default values for your state when it loads. Also, if you need to bind, if your function needs to access this, you'll need to bind this to it. So a lot of these functions, I'm binding them here just to make it a little prettier down the line. So component did mount. That's just a standard React function. It's like on load when it's loaded. There's also like component will mount, component unmount, will unmount, all that stuff. But there's a lot of functions. It's very similar to jQuery where you have document on ready. You have resize your window. So then I just have all these functions I've created that I needed their helper functions. So the main part here is this render function. So this render function is actually, we have a div. We just have one div. If we look at the actual application, it's just called root. So this div ID root, right? That's where our whole React application is basically initializing itself. And that's what this render function is. It's specifically what we return out of this function. So this is where it really starts. This stuff I'm kind of setting up data to display or not. So we'll get into that. But okay, so login markup. That's the first one. So I'm making login markup null to start out because we really only want login if you're not logged in. So then I come back over here, and if it's false, if you're not logged in, then we actually add divs and stuff to the login markup variable and then render it down below. So is everybody still following along here? Okay, cool. All right, so you have your value, and this is your username input, your password input. Here's the default values for them. So whenever it changes, I'm running a function, input change, and that's basically just updating this it's updating the state password with the value. So, and the way it gets that state is from the name of it. So if I'll just scroll up to input changes. So that's where the actual function is. This is the event that it automatically gets passed to it, which is just that input. So then you have, I'm taking the name and setting a state on that name with its value. The reason I'm doing it is like this is so that I can just, anytime I want a new input, I can just define a new input and add a state up top. I won't have to make one of these for everyone. So anyways. Okay, so that's updating both of those states. When you click on log in, I'm actually logging in the user. So let me just go through my slides here. Yeah, so I think I'm still, so that's where this Ajax login comes from. So it's that login function, right? This button right here. And if I go into the application, I'll go ahead and log in. Well, so if I just do a random password, you would set an error for it just not authenticating. Right now it just doesn't do it. But if I actually put the right password in, it logs me in. So what it's doing is it's calling the login function when I click on that button. So first thing we do is build our token, which is in Postman. If you saw it up here, it's this. This is your token right here, and that's just your username followed by colon and your password, and then base 64 encoded, which is what this function B2OA does in JavaScript. So I'm base 64 encoding username, password, and then I have my token. So I'll go ahead and that's when I set my state for token. Something to think about is also putting that in local storage. So if I was to close and that token was still valid, you could open up your application and it would still have that token. All right, so now we're ready to actually make our Ajax call using this token. So all we're going to do here is basically try to make an Ajax call to our user profile. So that's what this is. This is my Doxel site right here, URL. And then JSON API /user/user. That's a standard and it's well documented. JSON API module is documented pretty good there. So then I just have to add some filters. This is a little complicated at first, but this is the name of my filter, username. And what I want to filter by is name. I want the value of that name to be the state of my username, which was admin. And then the operator is equals back here. So that's trying to view my user. And if you can't view your user, then something's not right with authentication. But if you can, then what it returns this data. This is just jQuery Ajax call, by the way. But it returns your data, which has attributes, which has your UUID for your user. And this is not your actual UID in Drupal. This is just sort of a lookup table for the JSON API. So I then set the state to logged in is true, and I also set the state of the user UUID. So now we're authenticated and we can pass that token, anytime we want to on the next calls we're going to make. Okay, so now we need to give them a way to actually add these accounts. So looking at my app here, I've got an add account button. It's pretty trashy, but it works. All right, so, and then I have a form for the title, host, port, username, password. So I'm looking at my Drupal site here. If I go to manage content, I have a couple of them. I'll just go ahead and delete them. All right, so I'm going to add a new one. I'm just calling it KP. Let's see. This is a virtual box I have spun up that I can SH into, but whoops. Okay, so host port is just the default 22. Username was vagrant. So I'm adding this account. Now if I list accounts, it's there. So the reason that is I've posted this now to Drupal, and if you refresh Drupal admin content, there it is. There's my FTP account. So alright. So the states we want for that: add account, which is Boolean. This is the status of what we are doing. Are we currently adding an account or not? That's just to determine whether we want to show the markup. And then we also need the states: add host, add port, add username, add password, add title. And those are the states that when we submit using this add account function, when we submit those states, we will then post them to Drupal. So let's just show that. So there's where I'm defining those states I just mentioned right here. Add account by default. You're not adding account when you start it up. So when you're rendering here, sorry. Okay, so yeah, so this is my add account button. When I click it, I'm setting the state to true. I'm now adding account. When that happens, I now have this add account form. And this is exactly how we did the other form. So it's using the same function and everything. The big thing here is that when you actually choose add account, that's where we're making our post call. So if I scroll up to add account, we're just going, just as just JSON API standard to post to a new node, you'll go to JSON API /node/ whatever your machine name is for your node. This one's FTP_account. To post, same headers and stuff that we always need. Tokens already taken care of before. This time though we need to add data for the node. So you can add your node type. It won't add it if you don't add that, even though you're at the right URL. But okay, and then these states are already filled out in the text field, so we're going to go ahead and add those as attributes. If let's go ahead and get one of these accounts here, just to look at. So we're grabbing all FTP accounts. So you can also look at this as a way of sort of map what you're going to post to that. So attributes, I want these fields down here and the title. So and there's the data. So yeah. And this data right here is just your actual data header that you're passing in the AJAX call. This is your whole string that you need to add. Okay, so let's see. That's what let me add that account. So now we want to list all our accounts. Let me see. I'm just going to add a dummy one. Okay, I added 2 dummy ones just to show how we're listing them from Drupal. But it's let me go back to the PowerPoint. So we need to state for when list accounts is active, just like we've been doing, when to show them. A grab accounts function, this is what I called it. Jeez. So then we would need, inside that grab accounts function, we would set our state of accounts, which is would be an object of all of the accounts that are under our username. And then when we render it, we would want to build a list. What is it? Yeah, okay. We would build a list we'd have to have an on-click to set it as our active account that we want to use to connect. So, all right, so going to that, we set list accounts to true. We want to show that div with the list. We make an AJAX call. This is I looked this up in JSON API, and just a way of filtering by your UUID. So when I call, I'm just doing a get, and I'm calling the FTP accounts, but I'm filtering them by only the accounts that I've created. And when it's successful, go ahead and update accounts with that object. So going down to our render function, here's if list accounts is true, and there's more than 0 accounts, then we create our accounts array. Yeah, so that's basically now going to populate that with our for loop. As we loop through these accounts, we will push to that accounts array each LI with an on-click function, first of all, to set that as an active account by your NID. And we also want to just put the title in there. And I also added to, if the NID equals the active NID, then just go ahead and make it yellow right here. So if I actually click on KP right here, then that's how you know it's the selected one, and you can now connect to it. Yep, we just so set active account. Let me just look at that function real quick. That's the one that each LI is getting. Okay, so we're posting, or sorry, getting the FTP account filtered by that node NID. That way we could go ahead and grab all of the account data. So account title, host, username, port, password, and we are setting our state, our active account state. Just looking at how we start that out, we have our active account, which is just, we define it as an empty object. And then we just fill it up. And the reason, and I kind of fill it up in this way because later on when we use SSH2, it's a node module to connect, that's just how the settings should be. So, that lists our accounts. Okay, so I think there's only really one last piece of this, just a proof of concept of transferring a file or something. So I've logged into my Vagrant box. My user is Vagrant. Just going back to where I list these files. Well, actually, I never went there, but yeah, let me keep going through the slideshow. The initial SFTP connection is when we actually hit connect. We have the directory state and the list state. So which directory we're in on the server and what files are actually listed there. What was that? Yeah, so that's on the handle click function, which is just this connect button. So going down to handle click. So I'm actually just hard coding the directory we're starting in, which is the home directory, and then setting the state of the directory to where we are. Okay, and then right here is where we actually set the list of files that we're reading. And this is just, this API right here is just SSH2 node module. So if you look it up, it'll show you ways to connect and use it. Still has nothing to do with Electron there, but at the end, this is where we're passing in our active account credentials, which has the host, port, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's why when we click on it, it shows all the file, or it shows that directory, what's inside of it. We're listing it out in the render function, and all I'm doing is checking. I'm checking the mode to see if it's a file or folder, just so I can gray it out. So when we look, you can actually see, you can actually click inside a folder. So. Okay, so let me see if I can wrap this thing up. Okay, so yeah, so the one thing I really wanted to do was drag a file from my computer, which shows something that Electron can do. And that was actually one of the easiest parts. But so if I go to my app, let me just connect back and go to her home. That's my home directory. So I do have permissions to write there. So now I can just grab a file. No. Okay. So I'm going to grab this screenshot, drag it over and drop it. File transferred successfully. I didn't make it actually reload here, but what you would want to do, but it is there. There it is right there. Okay, so the way that went down, let's see. Yeah, so we have, oh crap, what did I just do? Oh, all right, so I'm gonna make that disappear.
Just escape.
Thanks. All right, so the main thing here is on drag, which is JavaScript. On drop, we're running the drag drop function, and we had to just return false when we drag over, drag leave, drag end, so that it actually quit. Because if you actually drag over and try to leave, it'll still have your the state application in leave mode or whatever, like your pointer and stuff. You couldn't click, but so drag drop is we're using. I don't think I mentioned this, but I did mention SSH2. But what we're doing, we're importing a class from their client that we can then use. What were we doing? All right, drag drop. So, this is another reason, like, ideally you'd comment on your code and stuff like that, but, I did not do that. So, anyways, we are reading the stream of our FS, which we also had to require, our file system on the server. Okay, that's our path. That's just so how we know where to put it. And just the way it was formatted, I had to split it on the dat or slash. I had to do a couple little things to format it the way we need it, just to get the name. So once I got the file name, I used this SFTP to then write it, and it just worked like a charm because it's a node module. But yeah. So then after, that's when I did the alert to file transferred successfully and ended the stream. And just like in the other connection we made, at the very end you add connect and add your credentials there, so that it knows which account to send it to. So that's pretty much it. So I just think it's really cool. Not many people would even think of using Drupal as a backend for a desktop application, but it makes sense to me. Maybe not necessarily for this case. It works, storing accounts and stuff like that, but definitely for other applications, you could see where you'd want to be adding content viewing, user data. You've already got all that built in. Whereas other methods, you'd have to actually create your own little React application or whatever it was just to manage all that stuff. So I think it's pretty cool. Is there any questions? I know that was probably pretty confusing, especially if you haven't done anything with React.
That's backing up your application. What you guys do, Electron application. The Docker container is not going with it.
Right. That's just my backend. It's totally separate. It's a website on the cloud.
Okay.
Normally is what it would be.
Okay.
Right. And
So this
that's
is the front end.
so yeah. This is the front end.
Okay.
And what would usually make more sense is using SQL or something or local storage for this to keep it all here. But what's nice about Drupal is I'm throwing the accounts in there. When I compile this app, I can go to my Linux computer, install it, and there's all my accounts.
Yeah.
Right. So, as soon as I log in, anyways.
So that executable runs on your Mac. It would run on a
PC as well?
Yeah.
And what about mobile devices? Is there an Android?
No, but you could also, well, no. I was going to say you could run it on as a website, but you couldn't. You wouldn't be able to use all of Electron's features, like, which I'm only using one, which was just the file transfer, but there's all kinds of other features to use.
So to package that up and give it to, say, him, you would give on his laptop. What would you give him in particular?
Well, he's got a Mac, so I would give him a DMG file, and it's just like installing on a Mac. If you just double click it, it would install, and then you'd have to drag it to your applications folder.
Well, you would run like node build or something like that in your command line, and it would generate the DMG.
Actually, I haven't done that part. It's probably you just have to look at the Electron documentation, but it's all running on Node.js and Chromium on the front end, so there's no question of whether it will work or not. All these there's only a limited set of functions you can actually use, so all it's going to work. Actually, here you go. Packaging, npm run package tat dash all, or you could just specify which one you want to build. So